So we're live now.
Okay. Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone from Dakar in Senegal. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this exciting session as part of the Africa Comes Week web series. Thank you so much for joining us from different parts of the world. That's the power of the digital and internet to connect all of us amidst the COVID-19 pandemic we are experiencing. My name is Mikaela Issa. I'm Communications for Sustainable Development Consultant with a passion for ICT and all kinds of innovation that can benefit smallholder farmers in Africa. As co-founder of Water Digital, a partner of Africa Comes Week in Senegal, it is a privilege to moderate this session on innovative communications for AgriTech transformation in Africa. It is becoming clear that in tackling the present disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been presented with the opportunity to discover new strength and disposition to innovate, rethink and build robust agricultural systems that will prepare the next generation. This session will address African context-specific AgriTech needs, challenges, solutions, and learning approaches to improve impact for sustainable AgriTech adoptions in Africa. We will obtain insight on ways to capitalize on existing innovation to create a new normal for the AgriTech sector in the near future for the transformation of the African continent while engaging key stakeholders. Help me welcome our speaker, Suleiman Okoth from Kenya. Driven by innovation and high-level communication and advocacy to improve understandings of agricultural technology across sub-Saharan Africa, Suleiman's 10 years experience in journalism, policy advocacy, stakeholder engagement, capacity building, and media relations spectrum has taken him through a journey across Africa, Asia, and USA, while exposing him to the agricultural and rural development challenges. Suleiman was a policy associate at Innovation for Poverty Action, IPA, where he helped manage relationships with key partners. Suleiman is currently a program officer at African Agricultural Technology Foundation, AeTech. Just a gentle reminder for all, our session will run 15 minutes with Q&A. First, Suleiman will do his 30-minute presentation, and after, we will open the Q&A to answer your questions. But from now on, we encourage you to ask your questions in the chat box. Please be specific and direct as possible. Now, over to you, Suleiman.
Thanks, Mika, and thanks, Eniola, Maurice, and the entire Africa Comms team. It is indeed a pleasure to be here today. My background is in communications, and currently I'm actually a program officer at African Agricultural Technology Foundation. I've worked in the ag space for a period of 4 years plus. Before that, I was in water and sanitation and health space. And I would be very glad to share my experience in how we can leverage on innovative communications to actually push the AgriTech transformation agenda in Africa. I don't know whether you can see my screen, Mika.
Yes, I can see your screen, Suleiman.
Yes. So the outline of my presentation I will look at the Africa agricultural sector and some of the challenges, and why we must think of social behavior change communication as a way of advancing agricultural technology in Africa. I will also share what we need to do to improve adoption of agricultural technologies and some of the challenges that I've experienced in using social behavior change communication. I will also share some examples of how to engage with different stakeholders in Africa to actually improve agricultural technology adoption. Now, to begin with, as comms people, we have to understand the kind of space that we work in. And one of the key issues that is important for any comms person is to actually understand the problem that we are dealing with. So briefly, in the ag space in Africa, we are facing several challenges. One of the key challenges is an aging farmer population. We have an average age of farmers of about 60 years. That means with the current COVID situation, we face a big challenge because that population of farmers are also a high-risk population when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic. Now, we also have the challenge of low productivity, and that is why using technology is a key issue for Africa to actually improve on productivity. For example, in maize production in Kenya is about 1.8 tons per acre. And that compares, if you compare that to the global averages, you're talking about 12 tons for US and the wider Europe. We also have challenges of unpredictable weather, and we also have the challenges of low adoption rates of technology. And one thing that is another big challenge is low investment in science, technology, and innovation. We have our governments that spend very little compared to other countries or other continents. Africa still, as a whole, spends very little in research, in science, technology, and innovation. Now, what do we need to do to address these challenges? We've seen all these arrays of challenges that we are facing in the ag space in Africa. In my view, I think we have to look at it from a technological perspective and also address it from a non-technological angle. What we need to do from a technological perspective is we have to have improved varieties. If it is seeds, we need to invest in improved seeds so that we can improve production. We need to invest and have better agronomic practices, and this has to be supported by farmer groups, by governments, and all stakeholders inclusive. Then a key area that we have to think of in terms of technological intervention is to also look at the aspect of post-harvest management. We have seasons where farmers in Africa harvest a lot, but because we don't have, we don't invest much as a whole in post-harvest management, we end up losing a lot of produce because there are no markets. When you have a lot of produce, you flood the market, and if you cannot store that or have better post-harvest management mechanisms, then we are also not advancing that much. And it will affect food security as a whole in countries and also in the continent. The other aspect that we have to look at is mechanization, and also look at how we can replenish our soils when they are overused. We look at how we can invest in inputs like fertilizers, for example. From a non-technological perspective, we have to invest in enabling policies. Governments need to be supportive so that the environment is good. You need the goodwill from government so that they can support technologies. We've had a case where some the government policies have hindered farmers accessing certain technologies. So you need policy frameworks from government, also regional bodies where AU, for example, comes in handy to actually give a framework and have enabling policies so that technologies can be accessed easily and maybe lead to adoption. Most importantly, you also need public-private partnerships and communication, and of course, investment in extension or extension services so that farmers can actually get technical support within reach. Now, adoption of technology is something very complex in nature. And in my experience, communication specialists or ag-related organizations and government have to consider the aspect of social behavior change communication in actually moving or supporting agricultural technology adoption in Africa. Why am I saying social behavior change communication, and what is this animal called social behavior change communication? Briefly, in a very short form, it is actually a framework where you combine advocacy, you combine behavior change communication, community mobilization with the sole purpose of influencing change. Now, social behavior change communication actually refers to an application, the application of theory backed with research and communication strategies in an interactive and also systematic manner. The objective of using social behavior change communication is actually to promote individual and group behavior. And in this case, we are talking about farmers and related stakeholders. The other objective is to shift social attitudes, structures, and also norms, because if you address this, then you can address behavior change. And most importantly, you also have to address the issue of creating an enabling environment. You cannot just address the farmer only. There are different factors that actually affect the farmer to actually make up decisions. So you must have interventions at individual level, at group level, and also at policy level. Now, what are some of the key elements of having an effective social behavior change communication strategy? One key element that you need to have in an effective social behavior change communication is it has to be systematic. You cannot just come up with communication products and then give them to farmers and hope that you will change behavior. That has to be done in a very systematic way. It has to be based on evidence, and you have to invest a lot in research, getting to know different stakeholders in the agricultural space that actually affect the farmer and affect decisions on whether a farmer will get access to a technology or not. Then to have an effective social behavior change communication strategy, it must be, and I have to emphasize this, it must be participatory. What we've experienced is some organizations actually only roll out a communication strategy when they think they know more about who they want to influence. But they just have some element of participation, but it is not fully participatory. So in an effective social behavior change communication strategy, participation is very key. And when we talk about participation, you're talking about power play and getting to know who are the key players and how can you get their opinion to actually influence your design. The other key area or element of an effective social behavior change communication strategy is the aspect of capacity strengthening. you need to have that in your strategy so that you can strengthen capacity of different stakeholders at different level. It is important also to know that innovation, there's a relation between innovation and the decision-making process. You can either make a decision to adopt, if you look at that chart, or to reject a technology, and therefore it is key to monitor that trail. And social behavior change communication strategies actually allow you to monitor that based on evidence, based on research, and based on your ability to build capacity of different stakeholders to support you in having the change that is intended. Now, I will just walk you through my experience in building or designing effective social behavior change communication strategies that can actually have an impact in the agricultural space. And some of the key considerations that you have to keep in mind. One key consideration that you have to keep in mind is the aspect of actually understanding your audience and actually defining your problem from the start. As we've seen, there are so many problems or challenges facing the African farmer or in the agricultural sector in Africa. So you can possibly not address all the challenges at once, but you have to be specific and define a problem and understand the audiences that you want to influence. In that case, you'll need to have invest in proper data analysis and impact, do research on adoption and with what impact. For example, if you are addressing maybe adoption of a particular technology like hybrids, you have to look at the history behind that. You could do that through key informant interviews. You could also do that through focus group discussions or even through observation. The other aspect that I touched on briefly is actually incorporating theory. It has to be backed up by theory. You can use behavior change communication models, persuasion theories, and many other communication theories that can support the framework and can have an impact and eventually have sustainable social behaviors. Then, of course, it has to be participatory, and then you can have different stakeholders. You can use key informant interviews, and you can even have radio shows like now when you have the COVID situation. And most importantly, when you're doing a participatory program design, you have to test your messages, and based on the kind of feedback that you get, you have to test and make alignments. If the messages is intended to target policymakers, you bounce them off to your policymakers and see whether they have the intended outcome that you want to change. When you're doing the implementation, another key consideration is how you're going to implement that, how you're going to implement your social behavior change communication framework. You have to think of audiences. You have to think, monitor the activities. You have to select or think about the channels that you're going to use, the kind of partners you want to bring on board, and the kind of personnel that you'll be using. And evaluation also is very key. And when you're doing evaluation, you have to think of an evaluation against set objectives. When you're doing evaluation, you have to look at the process. You have to look at the impact in terms of the behavior, and sustainability is the social behavior change communication strategy that you're implementing or you're injecting into a program. How sustainable is it? Is it a behavior that can be maintained even past the initiative, or it is a it is a behavior that is only for a short time, as long as funding is there. Now, when you're talking about behavior change communication, and when you're talking about agricultural adoption of agricultural technology, one thing that we cannot run away from is organizational reputation. People react differently when they interact with technologies, especially when they are new technologies. So I will share this graphical representation, and what it means. The say-do gap briefly means the difference between what messages an organization or a project, in this case, shares on agricultural technology targeting, say, the farmer. And the experiences, the do is the experiences that the farmer actually experiences when they interact with that technology, or what organizations or government, for that matter, do in terms of that technology. So what it means, your credibility will suffer when you have a very wide say-do gap. So as communication professionals, our role is to try as much as possible to minimize that say-do gap so that we can be believable. When people have the similar experience to what we say that the technology will do for them, then they will have what other people call less dissonance. So when they actually believe your messages and get, if you say that the technology works to reduce weeds, if they apply it, that is what they get, then actually your credibility will be higher. So it is upon communication professionals to actually monitor what people say, what do the farmers feel about the interactions with the technology. Also importantly, there are things we can do to improve impact of our interventions and also promote adoption. One key thing is we have to look at the context. Farmers in Africa are not the same. Farmers in Senegal are different from farmers in Kenya or farmers in Nigeria. So we must understand their context. We must understand who influences them, the kind of barriers they face in adopting the technologies, where there are barriers in terms of the value chain, and what triggers or what are the enabling factors in terms of acquiring new behaviors. Consideration of theories is key, and how we infuse those theories in our designs is also very important. We also have to understand use of evidence-based approaches, address barriers and motivators, and also build, which is key to actually build social norms and new behaviors. Some of the key principles that will help to actually build new behaviors. For example, if you infuse the element of community, having designs and implemented as a community collaboratively, bringing everybody on board. For an innovation also to be taken up, it has to be scalable in a way that it has to be very simple. Some people think that for a technology to be, for adoption to take place, you need to have a technology that is complex. In fact, the more complex the technology, the harder adoption and the harder the scalability. So the ability of that technology to be scaled is also a key hindrance, and one that is also something that we have to look at, as scalability will help build new behaviors. If we don't think of how simple a technology is, we might be limiting the chances of that technology being adopted. It also has to be of high quality, sustainable, and should reach many people. Again, another principle is engage partners across sectors. Don't just think farmer groups, think about families, think about children, think about the networks that farmers belong to. Farmers are also parents, so how can we target parents, for example? The other principle is community directed, in the case that, in the sense that it has to be the community that is actually that we intend to influence has to be empowered to take charge to improve their own livelihoods. And we have to take into consideration the aspect of gender equity. We have to, once we look at a particular community or where that technology, a particular technology is to be implemented, then we have to look at the makeup of the gender makeup of the farmers or farmer group, for example. And last but not least, it has to be linked to the whole agricultural value chain. Something else that I would want to share with you is some of the common myths that we as communication officers or professionals might sometimes overlook. Sometimes one of the myths is when we increase knowledge will lead to high impact agricultural practices. The reality is high impact must extend beyond traditional communication approaches. So for us to have high impact, we have to think beyond just having traditional press release, traditional communication materials, or having posters to actually send agricultural messages. The other myth is single messaging targeting key audiences like farmers can influence behavior. That is a myth. The reality is behavior change is very complex and it is contextual. And that is why our social behavior change communication strategy are actually recommended, because they will help you to actually dig deeper into understanding behaviors of people and what motivates them. Another key myth is a single activity targeting a single subset can lead to sustained change in behavior. This might not be true, because at the end, investing in quality and delivery of service and building capacity is very key. You need partnerships and you need to build their partnerships. Otherwise, just targeting and sending messages and targeting some subset of population alone will not lead to behavior change. So essentially what this slide talks about is the strategies. The key strategies of social behavior change communication is advocacy, social mobilization, where you use the community and all the platform, community platforms that you can get access to actually influence behavior, and also behavior change communication, where you target individuals at individual level, at community level, and also using a range of multimedia platforms in a participatory way. As we know, human behavior behavior change is contextual. It depends on culture. There are different networks of influence. And then decisions about adoption or not to adopt is also faced by different priorities. For example, we know that smoking, if I may use that example, is harmful to your health. And we know that there's a lot of research about that. But people still smoke. Even people, medical doctors smoke. Some medical doctors smoke. Yet evidence says that smoking will lead to other medical complications. So essentially, what we learn from research is actually decisions are not made mostly based on logic. Most of our decisions that we make as human beings are made based on emotions and not logic. So we have to think about that. So a few examples, I'll share a few examples of some of the strategies that you can actually infuse social behaviors change strategies or frameworks to actually improve on adoption. When you're engaging, for example, farmers, farmer field days are very good opportunities where you can influence behavior and also incorporate aspects of social behavior change communication. However, I must warn that when you have farmer field days, it has to be systematic. Remember those elements that we are talking about, it has to be systematic. You don't just do one field day per year and then you say that you're actually incorporating social behavior change communication. Farmer field schools are also very key, where you can actually have, other people call them demo fields, where farmers can actually interact with a particular technology. Seeing, believing tour is another great opportunity where you can influence behavior, but it also has to be done strategically. Seeing, believing tour is where you take a group of farmers who, for example, don't know much about a technology, say hybrid, let me stick to hybrid maize, for example, as a very popular crop in Africa. If you have a technology like hybrid maize that is that is new and performs very well in a particular ecological area, then you need to take farmers in a research field where they can actually see for themselves and experience for themselves. And that will help in actually influencing behavior if it is done in a systematic way. Education, mixing education and entertainment is also a very good way of actually incorporating social behavior change, because we know that most people want an aspect of entertainment in engagement. You don't just want to be too academic. Use of drama and drama groups, you could, in a participatory manner, work with a youth group in a particular community and dramatize on some aspect of change that you want to actually bring about, or the desired change. Use of multimedia posters. Barazas is actually a Swahili word for meetings in a community, bringing together community leaders. And also there is an aspect or a new avenue for engaging farmers, new media and social media. However, I would put a caveat: when you're using new media, you must not just use new media because it is fashionable to use new media. Sometimes when you use new media to engage farmers, you are actually alienating them, because you should be able to know the farmers that are on social platforms and in which platforms. Otherwise, the intention of reaching farmers might backfire, and you will end up just experiencing farmers not getting your information because they have inability to actually use certain platforms effectively. When you're engaging policymakers, there are also strategies that you could employ. And one of the strategies, several strategies have actually been very effective when engaging policymakers. When you're engaging decision makers, sometimes it is very key. Most of the time, let me not say sometimes, most of the time it is very key to actually segment them and know who are the key decision makers. So one-on-one high-level meetings will be very key. So for example, if you are in Nigeria, you could meet a governor one-on-one and actually address their issues one-on-one regarding a particular technology, make them understand about that technology, and see how best they can help you in terms of coming up with favorable policies that will actually lead to farmers accessing certain technologies. And again, seeing is believing tours, like I explained. You could also use seeing is believing tours to actually target policymakers. Some of the policymakers might not be agriculturalists or scientists, but they make decisions. So if we don't offer them opportunity to see what researchers are doing, then they're most likely to make decisions that are not favorable to certain technologies and therefore hinder their adoption. Another key avenue that you can actually use to help is the aspect of policy dialogues. And whenever you have policy dialogues, ensure that you have policy briefs. These are brief write-ups summarizing the key issues and that will be important for policymakers to help them make decisions. If you just bombard them with a lot of information, they might be confused and might not help your cause. Seminars is also critical for key committees. For example, you could target committees like agricultural committees, finance or budgeting committees, because they also make decisions on budget allocation. And any other committee, for example, committees on information, communication, and technology, and tell them about technologies and how they can come up with positive or favorable laws to advance agricultural technologies in particular country or in Africa. A key audience, and I would say a very key audience, when you're going to engage farmers or stakeholders in the agricultural sector to change behavior, is using the media. The media is very powerful, and the media has key objectives. One of their key objectives is to inform the publics on matters of public interest. They have to, another objective is to entertain, and at a higher level, they also change perceptions. The media is also powerful in changing perception, and they can also set the agenda. They can have a media agenda that they set. So it is important for us to leverage on the media to actually pass our messages. And how can we do this in an innovative way? You could think of things like media awards, but I would want to warn you that when you're thinking of media awards, don't think short term. If you think short term, it will not work. You will not be able to influence. The beauty about engaging the media is the media will be a go-between. Like one of my colleagues said, using the media is actually like using a step-down transformer, where you actually take a lot of high voltage power and then you break it down to power that can be consumable. So it is very important that the media is well engaged to actually advance agricultural technology. When you engage them through media awards, you're also able to build their capacity to actually understand those technologies and even report better. You can even have grants, and you could have what I call dynamic media engagement model where you can engage the media along with other key stakeholders. For example, if you're going to meet farmers in a field day, you engage media professionals or journalists where they can come and capture the story and capture real stories of public interest from the farmers. At the same time, you can engage policymakers so that when they answer, the journalists are there to capture what they're talking about. So the dynamic media engagement model engages the media along with key stakeholders to actually minimize the misreporting in the media. And of course, media training. So you're not actually training them in the media aspect, but you're training them to report, to improve reporting, scientific reporting. Remember, most media practitioners in Africa are not trained on science reporting. So they might have a lot of cases of misreporting, not because they are bad journalists, but because they are not well grounded in the field. So as a communication officer or as organizations, we have to think about how we engage the media to carry our messages across and eventually break down the barriers and also influence agricultural technology adoption in Africa. In conclusion, strategic communication is very key in decision making, and it has to be incorporated from the beginning of projects until when projects come to an end, and also during the course of implementation. That is the only way that we are going to achieve sustainable social change in agricultural technology in Africa. And I would like to say, to end with a proverb from Madagascar, which says, "There's nothing bigger than the stone, but since it does not communicate, even the birds shit on it." So let us not be the proverbial stone. Let us stand up as communication professionals, and let us add value in supporting adoption of agricultural technologies in Africa. Thank you very much, and I'll be glad to share in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suleiman, for this insightful presentation that you just delivered. We already have a few questions that I will ask you from the participants. Natalia Lima wants to know how to influence students to search in the AgriTech technology field. How do you think we can encourage a student to do research in the agri field?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm not a researcher. I'm a development communication professional. So the way I will deal with that and incorporating social behavior change communication is to actually engage. The beauty about engaging students or pupils is you have a better chance of influencing people when they're young than when they're older. What we've done before is to have agricultural clubs and support agricultural clubs in schools. We've done that in some of the projects that I've been involved in. We've done that in Ghana, we've done that in Nigeria, we've done that in Kenya and many other countries. So some of these initiatives, we call them Catch Them Young, where you actually engage pupils in primary schools or students in high schools and have them interact with scientists. Currently I work with the Agricultural Technology Organization, and we deal mostly with scientists, and we encourage the scientists to engage with students, because sometimes I think back when I was a student, and you're not so sure whether you want to go into agricultural communication or you want to go into science communication, and you're wondering where are the mentors. So we have mentorship projects or programs are also very influential, because if you look back, you can look back to one of the instant in your life where maybe a teacher influenced your decision to take a particular course or a particular way of or career to actually venture into. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question, but briefly, that is what I would say.
Thank you for your answer, Suleiman. Another question from Joa Sousa. How do you approach the evidence and research phase of social behavior communication for change? How do you approach the evidence and research phase?
In social behavior change, like I shared before, behavior change is very complex. Now, you need to be very systematic and you need to be very strategic. If you're going to have an initiative, remember behavior change communication, social behavior change communication is going beyond just having press releases or just having communication materials. So this is a higher level where you are actually influencing. If you're going to influence, whatever you're going to do has to be backed up by evidence. If, for example, you're going to build the capacity of journalists to actually understand a particular technology, you should be able to say in 2 years how that activity of building capacity of journalists tied with your objective, say, of improving adoption of hybrid maize, if I was to use that technology again. So you are not just using media engagement in a separate way, but you're using it to add value to your common objective of improving adoption. So it has to be systematic and it has to be structured. You could also borrow from theories. There are many theories that you could borrow from that could help you in designing social behavior change communication frameworks. You could borrow, for example, from persuasion theories. There are many theories about persuasion that you could borrow from and inject in your programs or initiatives that you have. Diffusion of innovation, you could borrow and see, for example, we learn from diffusion of innovation, if you are to get evidence from that, is that not many people will take a new innovation. So when you have a new innovation, it follows like a bell curve. So how are you going, as a communication strategist or a communication officer that is involved in agriculture, how are you going to target, for example, the early adopters of a technology? Because the early adopters will help you move or influence and spread the adoption. If you don't have clear strategies of targeting them, then you might end up having a lot of backsliding in the sense that people will pick up a technology and you'll assume that somebody has adopted a technology and 2 years down the line, they drop it.
Okay. Great, Suleiman. Another question is about strategies to collect data in environments that are sometimes geographically remote. How do you think we can address that challenge in collecting data in remote areas?
Hello?
Yes, Suleiman?
Yes, working with farmers, I think for me, it is critical that any technology that you bring on board is a technology that is friendly to the farmer. If it is a technology that the farmer does not know how to use, it is up to you to train those farmers to actually use it and use it effectively. Otherwise, it might not yield the intended results. But there are a lot of digital platforms that you can use to actually collect data digitally without actually going to the farm. There are a lot of ICT platforms that you can help you collect data through mobile phones and other ICT technologies. Did I answer that?
Can you give some examples in terms of platforms where that can be used to collect data?
In Kenya, for example, there are platforms like DigiFarm, where you can actually, a farmer can log in and give information and ask for information about a particular technology. So I think there are various platforms that can actually be developed to collect data from farmers without actually being physically there. But the key thing when you're thinking about communication for development is the sustainability of that initiative. So if you're going to inject any aspect of communication or of technology targeting a farmer, and in this case, an African farmer, and we learned that the average age of an African farmer is 60 years. So imagine a 60-year-old farmer in Kenya or in Senegal or in Ghana or in Tanzania, and you have a digital platform. So you have to educate that farmer, and only then, if you make it simple enough for that farmer to actually appreciate it, then you can use it effectively. If it is not simple, then there are high chances that it will hinder the process rather than actually help you. So there are very many platforms, but you have to use them with caution.
Great, great. We have a question from Caroline Njoki. Do psychological factors influence adoption of AgriTech? And how do we tackle this in social behavior change?
Thank you, Caroline. Yes, like I mentioned before, there are different factors that actually influence a farmer before they actually make a decision. So your intervention, the beauty about social behavior change communication is you use different interventions targeting different spheres. When you target a farmer, you are most likely to influence that farmer if you know the networks that farmer is attached to, if you know his or her religion, and you're also most likely, because the farmer might be very positive about a technology, but the environment might not be conducive. If government policies does not allow, for example, to have genetically modified maize in a country, even if a farmer wants that technology, it will be hard for that technology to reach that farmer. So yes, you have to address it not just from a psychological factor aspect of influence, but holistically from different spheres. I hope, Caroline, I've answered that.
Thank you, Suleiman, for answering all the questions from our participants. I would like to say a great thank you to all the participants, to ACW team. And this is the end of our session. It was very insightful, and I hope we had enjoyed listening to your presentation. And hopefully we will share the presentation with all the participants. Right, Suleiman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining in. I hope you are safe wherever you are. I've given my contacts just in case you need to ask any further questions. I'll try as much as possible to answer what I can answer. Thank you again for sparing the time, and stay safe.
Thank you.